So the harm principle requires a particular and special notion of harm. We can't just use the regular English notion because that's too wide. We talk about too many things being harmful, just regular old injuries or even insults or minor hurts. And all of those things, if we were to say that those count as harm in the sense used by the harm principle, then we would have to be willing to admit that those things can be legitimately criminalized. So what we need is a technical notion of harm that's going to be restrictive enough so we'll only be bringing in the harm principle in the cases that we think are intuitively necessary. So the main thing about harm is that a person who is harmed has to be made worse off. But there's lots of different ways of negatively affecting people. Um, so it can't just be any setback of interest. It has to be a special kind of setback of interest. Because, for example, if you were running a race, the winner of the race would be setting back the interest, would be negatively affecting all the other runners, and therefore she would be harming them if that's all there was to harm. So there needs to be a second condition to the concept of harm. Well, since we know that harm under the harm principle is the sort of thing that we should be prohibiting, we know that harm is by nature a kind of, well, by nature a bad thing. So what we need to do is just bring in, use that to construct our notion of harm. In other words, we add in the idea that harms have to be wrongful. That is, you only harm somebody in the sense relevant to the harm principle if you set back their interests in a wrongful way. And the way that we can talk about that, there's a lot of different ways of talking about wrongful here, but the way we can talk about it is basically as a rights violation. So in other words, on this notion of harm, a person harms another person when she sets back their interests through violating their rights.